have battles over our rights, journalism issues, as well as hotshot corporate groups sort of debating amongst themselves whether the pricing of natural gas is right or not. So now we are on to a kind of a different sort of issue, and I'm really proud that we are sort of going into these areas also. The press club for many years, did nothing but have it sort of little evening tippler on the way home, but it has emerged as a sort of forum where we invite a lot of discussion, and we also invite a lot of social causes to air their views here. So when Indrajit Gupta, colleague and a friend and a very senior journalist, said that we should do something in terms of also contributing to change in society, we took it up, and the managing committee decided to support the Daan Utsav, which is a week-long program where people experience the joy of giving. Firstly, when Venkat and Indrajit sort of introduced the subject to me, I thought it was to get journalists to sort of open up their wallets and give some money. So I thought that will be very, very difficult. So as it is, their wallets are very, very slim considering how things are in the economy. So I was sort of nodding my head, but then they said it's giving of every sort. So that was very, very welcome, and we started applying our minds on what we could do. And then over time, some very interesting concepts have emerged, which is that we thought as a profession, people want to know about it, and there are people who want to enter the profession. So why not connect up with other people and people who are not so who are not so gifted, who are not so sort of well positioned in their own social status, to come and experience what journalism is about. So we said, let's take two areas. One is photojournalism, and which is, as we know, it's sort of the importance of a photograph says more than 1,000 words. So how does that work out? And we said, let's join hands with a couple of NGOs. Let's join hands with a couple of slum kids who are keen about doing something in photography, who may be thinking or dreaming of about a career in photography. So what we will have is a 15-day or a 15 or 20-day course starting around 15th of September, where kids from three areas. One, Geeta Nagar at Tata, it's actually the southernmost point, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. It's a slum of about 3,000 strong. And we've put up boards there. We invited kids to volunteer who would like to sort of join this. And also from Akanksha, another NGO which is going to contribute some kids. And maybe a batch from Dharavi as well as Chandivali, which is north. So we'll have a batch of about 30 to 40 kids and about 10 to 15 journalists, photojournalists who will go around with them in sort of all over the city, sort of explain theory, practical, and maybe many of these kids will be budding photographers in a few days, a few months, or a few years' time. So that's the first step. The other was, what's a newsroom? How is news produced? How does the actual act of printing of a newspaper happen? How does radio perform? And it'll be, you'll be you'll be very happy to know that there's a huge contribution on this front. Radio Mirchi has joined hands. Times has also said that they would be on board. Midday said they'll contribute to this. So we'll have again a batch of 30, 40 kids of a smaller age group who are extremely curious to know how these things are done. In Dharavi, actually, there are kids producing a weekly and a fortnightly paper. And they're producing it purely out of what they think is a newspaper. They've never actually visited a newsroom and seen how it's done. So, this is one way these guys are going to learn how a newsroom functions, what is news, how selection of news happens, finally, what are the different the different positions within a newspaper, what does the editor do, what does the sub-editor do, what does the design guys do, all that. And maybe they'll also enter the profession at some time. Now, all this is going to sort of collate together And these budding photographers are going to go around the city with our photojournalists. Some of the stuff that they produce will be part of an exhibition which will start on the 2nd of October and continue for the week. And it'll be open to the public. People can come and enjoy their photography. Some of them might get selected. Who knows? You know, that kind of thing. So these are the two programs that we've specifically listed. Hopefully this will kick off, and many of the journalists will go back to these areas from where these boys and girls came from. Some of them are from municipal schools, some of them from slums, some of them from Dharavi, and they go back and they, you know, continue their relationship and continue to contribute to bringing more and more such kids on board. So that's basically one way of, you know, the press club and journalists sort of contributing to the Joy of Giving Week. And I hope, you know, many of us who would volunteer could also be part of this. We work out how that could be done. So that's the program. And for the rest of the function, I'm very happy to introduce Venkat, who's the brain behind, or sort of formulated and conceived this whole idea of Joy of Giving, as well as the new name which they have, which is Daan Utsav, and we're very happy to associate with it. So he's an evangelist on this whole thing. He's given up everything else in life, and he's doing almost nothing else but telling people how to open their hearts and minds. So welcome, Venkat, and I leave you to introduce the rest of the program and the other speakers and the panelists who will follow. Thanks.
Thanks, Gurpreet. So I'm going to just try and keep it short. There's a short 4-minute film that we'd like you to see, because that'll give you a very, very good perspective of what this Festival of Giving is all about. And I'll try and talk for 1 or 2 minutes at most, and won't hold you back from hearing Mr. Piramaluzia. So if you could just start the film first.
This Joy of Giving Week, and people from all over India have pitched in, and groups of people get together from different walks of life and contribute whatever they can, cash, material, anything, to look after the underprivileged and the poor in our country.
Students of Akanksha Shindewadi Municipal School in Mumbai are bringing the change they want to see. They are contributing 1 rupee at a time to help kids suffering from hearing disabilities by providing them hearing aid machines.
लखनऊ के लॉ मार्टिनियर गर्ल्स स्कूल में गिव इंडिया ने जब गूंज नाम के संगठन के साथ मिलकर जॉय ऑफ गिविंग वीक का आयोजन किया तो मानो पूरा शहर ही टूट पड़ा। बच्चे बूढ़े सबने अपनी पुरानी चीजों का दान किया।
उससे जैसे एक बच्ची भाग के गई, क्लास से एक बिस्किट का पैकेट ले आई कि मैम इस बिस्किट के पैकेट को किसी भी बच्चे के पास पहुंचा देना जिसको ये चाहिए। जो था इतना एक तरह से खुशी से, जैसे कि ये महसूस हुआ कि वो बच्चा समझ गया है।
And I think it's great that this whole Joy of Giving Week has been announced, and I think the whole concept of philanthropy is being talked about, and I think it's very good for the country.
44 CEOs on one platform, giving a single message to say, we care. And we care not indirectly and through writing a check, but we care enough to come here ourselves personally and to make that commitment. And in a unique concept, the Indian School of Business, or ISB in Hyderabad, organized an initiative called Shadow a CEO. Management students of ISB bid in an online auction to be able to spend a day with a CEO of their choice. Infosys chairman and chief mentor N.R. Narayanamurthy was one of the most sought-after CEOs in this program.
A frenzy of excitement as the Nilgiri heritage train chugs along its mountain track, 7,000 feet above sea level. A gift from Southern Railways for 40 special children. Just another way how we could spread cheer by giving for a cause.
Prakash Padukone and members of his badminton academy took time out to give these little shuttlers some playing tips.
इनका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहिए जो ये लोग अपना टाइम निकाल कर हम सब बच्चों को सिखा रहे हैं और हमें भी कुछ बनाना चाहते हैं लोग। आपकी बातें पसंद है? हाँ, बहुत पसंद है। मुझे भी बनना है बड़ा होकर, एक प्लेयर बनकर अपने हिंदुस्तान की शान बनना है मुझे।
I think it's extremely important because we are in a fortunate position right now to extend a helping hand to the less fortunate ones.
I'd like to say that the interesting thing about the Joy of Giving week, to put it simply, is that if you want to do anything, there is no blueprint. You can go ahead and do it.
So that gives you a basic idea. I'll try and speak in a mix of English and Hindi so that I just feel more comfortable doing that. So, आप लोगों ने ये film तो देखा. I think one of the interesting debates later on in the evening will be, you know, how does media look at things like this? You will find that a lot of the coverage is about celebrities. For us, actually, the most interesting part of this whole festival has been what we've done with the masses, so to say. So we've had stories of auto drivers in Chennai coming forward. It began in the first year itself. We had a group of 30 auto drivers who spontaneously decided in their own auto stand, after overhearing one of our volunteers in a conversation, each of them is going to contribute 500 rupees. This is in 2009. They raised 15,000 rupees. They bought food, materials, etc., cooked themselves, and served close to 650 people a sumptuous meal. Last year, I was in Bhubaneswar talking to a group of people there. One of them knew the auto union. It's called Auto Mahasangha there. We went and met them. We were speaking to them, shared this idea with them. Their spontaneous reaction, they identified 80 elderly people in different old age homes in Bhubaneswar, took them at their own expense for a 3-day trip to Puri for Jagannath Darshan, spending time on the beach, etc. After interacting with all these people, we actually learned that the name Joy of Giving Week is not a name that will work in India. It will work with, or maybe rather it may work in India, it will not work in Bharat, so to say. So actually, after a lot of chintan, we kind of decided early this year to rename it Daan Utsav, and we actually deliberated a lot before selecting this name. We had to find a name that was not, you know what, that was not so Hindi that it's not understood in the South, for want of a better way of phrasing it. So we tested this name out in the villages of Tamil Nadu, Kerala. We've tested it out in Assam and Gujarat, and we find that everybody is able to relate to this name. And with this name, we actually started traveling. We went to a village in Gujarat where we were talking to a bunch of farmers in a village called Davol. And after we gave them a lot of ideas, you know, like do a plantation drive in your village, or here are some things you could do, they looked at us as if we were very weird people. So finally we took our step back and we said कि आप ही बताइए, ये दान का उत्सव है तो आपको जो करना है करिए. Spontaneously, 4,000 families, they said we'll give you 4,000 liters of milk. हमारे बच्चों को दूध मिलता है, आप देश के किसी और हिस्से में जहाँ बच्चों को दूध नहीं मिलता, उनको ये दूध पहुँचा दीजिएगा. Amul has been kind enough to agree that they will handle the logistics of this. A month later, we were talking to our volunteers in Delhi. They talked to a bunch of farmers in Himachal, and we now have several farmers from different districts of Himachal who each pledged to donate 5 kgs of apples to people of some other part of the country. Exactly a week ago, last Monday in Chennai, our volunteers reached out to villagers there. We now got farmers from Tamil Nadu who have promised to donate bananas, the large bananas that they grow. And just this morning, a student from Ashoka University whose family is in the orange business in Nagpur, we were very reluctant to go to them because we read in the newspapers that, there's been a bad crop this year. But they said, that's okay, we don't mind. And so this person is going to help us get farmers from Maharashtra to donate oranges to people from some other part of the country. And what this is going to happen, the way this will happen is we'll have 2 people go with maybe the truckload of bananas or oranges to the other village in some other state of the country, spend a day, get to know them better, exchange the gift, share the gift with them. Those people will host them, take care of them, and then they come back. So for us, this is simply an act of building back that human-to-human connect that very often has gone completely missing in our lives. So it's not just about giving as in charity, but it's also about building those human bridges and bonds. That's what we're trying to accomplish. It's a 100% volunteer-driven effort. So we have Pramila, we have Indrajit himself, Yatish, Umesh, all of us who have our own livelihoods, our own work that we do, but we chip in a bit of time here to try and make this happen. That's the whole idea. I'll just stop here about the festival itself, and let's kind of come to the main issue that we wanted to discuss today. Both the importance, in a sense, of giving and compassion in today's society, and then later the panel discussion on what role can media play in accelerating that. So for our keynote address, I'll invite Ms. Piramal. I don't think he needs an introduction at all, so I'm not going to waste time telling you about his business exploits, etc. Many of you probably also know about his philanthropic pursuits. He has set up the Piramal Foundation, which I have visited several times, and it's one of the most interesting kind of things that you will see, where they've really built these fellowship programs in rural Rajasthan, and now they're expanding to other states, where young people are going, spending 2 years of their life working directly at the grassroots level, not just engaging in the community and understanding how life works there, but also then assisting leaders, school leaders and principals in that process, and themselves becoming leaders for change through that process. And it's not something that he just writes a check for. 3 times a year, he asks me to come with him when he's going there himself. So it's the kind of commitment that he's shown has been really amazing. He's also the chairman of Pratham India, and the foundation also runs a whole bunch of health initiatives, including HMRI and all of that stuff. I'd request Ajay Bhai to share a few of his thoughts on the importance of giving, and maybe a little bit of your personal journey if you're willing to. I know that you're reluctant to do that. It would be great if you could do that.
Thank you. First of all, I think it's a really unique initiative that you in the press club are doing. Normally when somebody comes to the press club, you can expect a very tough session, but here it's nice that the initiative that you're taking for either the photojournalists or the newsroom, I think that's really unique, so I want to congratulate you. I see here that we want to promote a culture of giving. Actually, if you look at it, in India, traditionally we've had a very rich culture of giving. I take the story from the Mahabharata. Probably you may remember that Karna was supposed to be Daan Utsav. He would always be very well known for all his charity. Anybody asked him something to give, he would never refuse. And the story goes that he was dying on the battlefield, and Krishna wanted to test him out. So he came as a Brahmin and asked him that, since you are supposed to be so generous, now give me something. So he says, yes, whatever you want, ask. So he says, give me all the good that you have done in your life. Just give that to me. And that's what Karna, without hesitation, actually gave away all his good deeds or something. So that's what is that culture of giving. Culture of giving is really, if you talk about any religion, it's so important. I mean, Saint Francis of Assisi wrote in his very famous poem, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace." And in one of the lines he says, "For it's in giving that we receive." So that importance is always there. But somewhere I think in the last few years, all of us have been chasing this wealth creation. All of us have been chasing this desire to move up in life and to really improve our, let's say, standard of living, that we've forgotten what it is to give adequately. But if you notice on the streets and you look at the street vendors who run these stalls of food, tea and snacks, you'll find that all of them actually contribute by giving to either a poor person, to giving to stray dogs. So, you know, we talk about this 2% CSR. I think theirs would be much more than 2%. So it is these small people who are still doing it as part of their daily life. There is this case of a person in Tamil Nadu who was consistently giving over his lifetime, and he's given 30 crores already, just counting, and the person only kept 10,000 rupees per month for his living. So these are examples that are there of culture of giving. I think the Daan Utsav is just is an initiative to really inculcate this culture of giving. And I can only say that once we start giving, and really it's not only money, but once we start engaging with people, engaging with them, then believe me that the satisfaction that you would get, and the real joy, when we say this joy of giving, that is really the joy. It is because sometimes money you give and then you forget, but it is when you give this time and you see the impact, as actually was shown in that film. You saw the first scene I was seeing when that boy just gave that his lollipop to the person on the street, and the smile on the boy who received that lollipop. I think those are truly important moments, if I can say, in each one's life. So I believe that it helps us, and as actually Swami Vivekananda said, that when we give something, we should not look down upon the person whom we are giving, but we should thank that person, because that person is actually doing you a favor by really allowing you to do that. So I think it's important. It helps us. It also helps our family. The values that it instills in all of us is a big issue. So I can only say that I feel blessed that I've been given, I've got an opportunity to give, and I assure you that you can feel the same. And the press actually has a very significant role to play. There is this, recently, everybody talks about the ice bucket, and there's this example of the rice bucket challenge where this woman in Karnataka raised it. I think it was the Hindu, which she talked about it on Saturday. Hindu published it on Sunday, and then you had 10,000 people who had contributed to it. So the power that you have is actually beyond what, so it's not really giving. Whatever you give is good, but if you can do this, it has a greater impact. We've seen the impact that Satyamev Jayate has had on TV, so why can't we do that in the press? Why can't we have, during this Daan Utsav, articles coming of examples of these common people? I mean, Venkat gave so many such examples of just people at random doing things. I think that will inspire people. That will also get people more and more involved. I think it's a great thing for society also if people start in this broader giving sort of culture. And I just want to end with another true story, and this is in 1890s, and there was this student who got admission into Stanford University in the US. Stanford even then was expensive as it is now. So he was an orphan, couldn't afford Stanford school, but very keen to do it. So he thought of an innovation. He thought that, why don't I organize a concert, a music concert, and raise some funds, and then that'll help me in paying for my fees. So there was this famous pianist called Pedrowski, and he went to him. So he went to the manager. The manager said, listen, he's a great guy, and the only thing he would do a concert for you, but it'll cost you $2,000. This fellow said, okay, why not, let's give it a try. So his friend and him both decided to organize that concert. They did the concert, but as many young entrepreneurs, all of us have had that experience, it was optimistic. He could only raise $1,600. And he also had to bear some expenses. So at the end of the concert, he went to Pedrowski. He offered him $1,600 and said that here is a check I'm putting for $400. And as and when I will earn it, I will give it to you, but this is a promissory note. Pedrowski said, forget it, I don't want it. He just tore up the check and he said, whatever has been your expense, and you take out $400 for your fee, which is then, if there's anything surplus, give it to me. So there was, he just accepted whatever it was, and that was the end of the story. His manager said, why are you doing it? He said, no, it's fine now, let it be. And now we go forward. The pianist becomes the Prime Minister of Poland. And during World War, Poland is really affected. There's no, there are 1.5 million people who are starving for food, and they're in a difficult situation. And the pianist, who is now the Prime Minister, actually writes to the US Food Mission, are seeking for help. And the person who's at the Food Mission is Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover later on became, as you all know, the President of the United States. At that time, he was heading the Food Mission. And he sent some food, grains to Poland, and that had a big impact as far as the 1.5 million people who were starving. So they were very happy. Pedrowski thought that it was just appropriate that he went to the United States and to thank them. And when he went to meet Hoover, Hoover said that there's no need for you to thank me, but I don't know if you remember, there was a story of, there was a time when you gave 2 students at Stanford the check, which allowed me to complete my studies. And that young boy it was me, I was Herbert Hoover. So sometimes when you do good, it comes back to you. So with that, I want to just thank you and congratulate you once again for the tremendous work that you all are doing. Thank you.
We'll move on to the next segment of our program. First, to introduce myself, I'm Indrajit Gupta. I kind of straddle both worlds. I'm a volunteer with Daan Utsav since the beginning of this year. And I'm also a member of the media community. And I've worked with the Press Club on many initiatives in the past. So this has been in the works for a while. We've been planning this, and I'm really privileged to announce that we've got a fantastic panel. I think all the people that we wanted are here, all 5, because they represent, to my mind, a very, very diverse panel of experience and passion and leadership in philanthropy. not just through words, but through action. So you've already heard Ajay. I'll request him to kind of join our panel. He has to leave, I think, in a few minutes, so we'll certainly have him as long as we can. Ajay, would you like to join us? I'll introduce the others as well, but before I do that, I think Gurveer forgot to mention that we're webcasting this live to a wider audience as well, because not everyone can be here in our midst. This is going out via Google Hangout, and another colleague of ours is kind of live tweeting this on Twitter. That should make Rahil very happy. I'd introduce each of you one by one. Would request if you could join Ajay on the stage. Ingrid Srinath. She obviously, I don't think, needs any introduction. She made her mark as CEO of CRY and chucked up a career, very good career in advertising to do that. And she's now moved on to a new assignment as CEO of HIVOS India, which is a development agency which funds projects in a whole host of areas. I'd also invite Gul Panak. Would you come and join us? I don't think, again, Gul needs any introduction. She wears many hats as an activist, as a producer, as an actor. Yes, please. I'd be sitting there. Just move in. Yeah, thanks. Rahil Khurshid, pleasure having you. He's come all the way from Delhi, so please give him a big hand. He heads news, government affairs as well for Twitter India. And finally, our very own Sachin Kalbag, who edits Midday. So that's the panel. I'll just kick it off with a round of questions. First to Mr. Piramal, since we may have to allow him to leave. He has an important engagement after this. Mr. Piramal, first question to you is, you've done so many wonderful things as part of your journey in philanthropy. But most often, most people like you who've done a fair bit are reluctant to talk about it in public. Now, that means that a lot of the conversation around philanthropy never really comes out in the public domain. We never know about it. It stays hidden. Now, what does that do to your mind about the cause of philanthropy and making that part of our, societal culture? Is that something purely uniquely Indian?
So one of the ways how we look at philanthropy, and this is not my view, it's really from, again, I refer to the scriptures a bit. So they say that there are 4 modes of giving. And so one is when you give in the mode of tamasic mode. And that is when you give charity for the wrong reasons. So let's say if I give charity to a beggar on the street who uses it to buy drugs. I remember there was a famous guy at Marine Drive. Whenever you gave it, he was a big druggie. So that's the wrong. I mean, that gives actually, that's not a good, if you talk in good and bad karma, that's a bad karma. Then there is the second mode of giving, which is in the rajasic way. That is the mode when you give only because you want your name there. I want my name, whatever. The third mode of giving is really the sattvic mode of giving, where you give because you believe that the cause is good. You want to give for the cause. Whether your name comes or not is not important. It's really you're giving for the cause. But there's a fourth way, which is the divine way of giving, is when you look upon yourself just as a trustee, and the wealth has been given to you to hold in trust by the Lord, and you are distributing it for the beneficiaries who are the rightful owners. So that's the way we were brought up in the good old days. That's how you looked at giving. But I know that a few years ago, people like Venkat and many others actually persuaded me to talk about it, because it's important to talk only because you need to set an example. So look at what Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have done. I mean, they have, if I'm not mistaken now, for their pledge of giving, they've almost got 370 billion to 400 billion. Actually, people have pledged that amount of money. So obviously there is a value in talking about it. And that's why we are in this stage where we are talking. Otherwise, honestly, if you asked me 2 years ago to come here, I wouldn't have done it.
But some, about last year or maybe the year before that, you did involve Bill Gates and even Nazim Premji to try and kind of discuss this through closed door sessions.
So frankly, this is happening every year. So it's because it's closed door, we're having, again this year in a few weeks actually, Bill is going to come. But we keep that because, again, people misread these. Sometimes they think you're just using it for publicity. But yes, a lot of that activity is going on now.
But would a pledge of that kind work in India, to your mind?
So I think it's difficult in India for that pledge, but people are becoming much more aware. So I'm finding that more and more people are pledging. May not be 50% of the wealth like they do in the US, or like Warren has done 99.99% of his wealth. But I think to some extent it's getting more awareness, and this is a slow process. It's changing mindset. So we don't have targets, we don't have persuasion. I mean, we have gentle persuasion and really by example. And when people like Bill and all that talk about it, it's real. So I think it's there. I know that over the period people will be aware, because let's face it, it's real wealth has been created in the last 10, 15 years have been real wealth has been created in India. So people will, I'm sure. The problem in India, of course, is that you have to, I think of my son, my grandson, my great-grandson, and I have to look after all of them. In the US, you don't care for anybody else but your own. So that is a problem. But I'm hopeful that, so actually Bill is coming to our office in next month, actually, we're going to discuss this.
Fantastic. I'd move on to Ingrid. Ingrid, you've obviously got a big fan club here from your folks who worked with you in advertising. Thank you so much. And then followed your work at CRY, where you did a brilliant job of engaging the media and getting the whole issue of child rights to the forefront. Most NGOs, you'd agree, aren't particularly good at advocacy. So did your kind of advertising communications background really help you in some form in trying to kind of do this better and trying to get the message across and engaging with media differently? Any things that you'd like to share from your experience?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that distinguishes CRY from other NGOs, and the reason it was so successful so early, is actually odd, because it started, the founder, Ripon, was an intensely shy man. Intensely shy. And the brand, in many ways, gave Ripon a way to hide away. So CRY's entire strategy of brand building, advocacy, visibility building is really an output, in a sense, of Ripon's intense shyness. But what CRY has done since is ensure that it employs on staff as well as agencies the best professionals it can afford to get. And then it treats, a lot of CRY's experience is like that bumblebee aerodynamics thing. CRY we never knew that we were supplicants who were supposed to go to journalists and beg for coverage. We thought we deserved it, and we acted as such, and we got it. So a lot of the coverage we sought was really how to get out of that development box. We really, we didn't want to be the touchy-feely story that gets buried in this cute little box. And so we would shamelessly pitch stories. Our financial results were a story. Our joint venture with Archie's was a story. Our HR practices were a story. We would do interviews, on subjects that typically NGOs were not necessarily supposed to be expert at. And we had no worries about failing. I mean, we tried everything. I can remember the really, really disastrous episode of the soap that looked like Sachin Tendulkar. It was horrible. I mean, the biggest marketing failure in history. But it never stopped us from trying. And so we just had this completely bumblebee approach, I suppose, to advocacy. We were very lucky also in some of our media partners. I want to single out Midday not because Sachin is here, but simply because they were that partner that was willing to invest in telling the story. You know, Melghat, malnutrition you would not have seen policy action from the Maharashtra government if Midday had not agreed to send journalists in there and then do that series of stories, not just the one-off. Sony, when they agreed to host India's first telethon, I mean, the investment they made, not just in the 7 hours of TV time, but in their expertise in technology and figuring out how a telethon works, was something that was priceless. So, yeah, I suppose we were shameless in asking, and as a result, we were able to get stuff maybe that wasn't quite so obvious.
That's fantastic. I mean, great to hear that. I want to kind of, in fact, come to Sachin since you've talked about Midday. Now, a lot of these so-called campaigns that we run, that's becoming more and more uncommon in a media world which is dominated by commercial interests. So how does media think about its wider social responsibilities, as it were, and sometimes even agree to do that without necessarily, all the bulls here, celebrities using them as a crutch? So any thoughts on that, Sachin?
I think there are two approaches to it. One is the philosophical approach. The philosophical approach is that I think the best that the Indian media can give to society is an independent voice. As we move along in this age of technology and social media and by partisanship rather than bipartisanship, it's the independent voice is slowly losing its importance and value. I think that's the first thing that the media should be giving to society. That I think it's also its fundamental duty. The second part is obviously the kind of campaigns that you spoke about. I'm really glad that my CEO is not here because we end up spending a lot of money. I get questioned at every board meeting that why did you send a person to Melghat, for instance? Why did you send a person to Vidarbha? Why did you send a person to Jawar, where there are these naked malnutrition kids and you're printing those pictures on the front page? What happened really was that we were opposed by a lot of people, including our readers. I mean, they called up and said, we don't want these kind of depressing news early morning. And we were really glad to find out that after we ran that series of malnutrition, which is, and it's not far away, it's just 80 kilometers from Mumbai. Okay, and there are 3,000 children who are affected by malnutrition just 80 kilometers away from Mumbai. And we ran a series of 7 stories, and we thought that that's the end of it. And we said we've done our bit. So what do we do? 3 months later, the Mumbai High Court, on a suo motu action, sent a notice to the state government saying that what is the status of these 3,000 children. And I have never felt so victorious in my life as that day when the Chief Justice of the High Court sent a notice to the state government, and they were forced to reply. The health minister was called to the court to depose. So they had to send a written reply. So there are these various. I'm sure that other media organizations also do it. I'm saying it because we actually executed that campaign, and we do that regularly. We did a series of stories just before the irrigation scam broke on a list of 250 dams which are non-existent in the state of Maharashtra. So one of our reporters, you know him well, Vinod Kumar Menon, actually went to 7 districts and found that there are 250 dams which are only on paper, and the government is feeding those local politicians with money to build those dams and reconstruct and maintain, etc. And we found that the total height of the dam is 2 feet. One dam was non-existent. Only the Bhumi Pujan was done, and nothing else was done. So, and this is about 3 months before the irrigation scam broke, and the irrigation scam became a very sexy story because a huge number was being touted, 1,80,000 crore or whatever. but it is actually these small stories that that need to be highlighted, because people are more or less affected by these small instances of misgovernance, small instances of corruption, rather than these huge coal block allocation scams or whatnot, which actually take the front page of every newspaper and the the lead headlines of every TV channel. So, because we are a small newspaper, we hardly sell about 200,000 copies. We cannot afford to do all these national stories. We are a city-based newspaper. So we do whatever we can to exploit the advantages of a local newspaper and try and give as much back to Mumbai as possible through these campaigns, through these stories.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Gul, I'll just kind of move on to you and before I come to Rahil. You've kind of had a couple of years ago an interesting experience in setting up SOAP, which was, I believe, a catalytic kind of philanthropic unit which was meant to drive volunteerism among youth and hopefully contributors from corporate India as well. How was that experience? Because it's all sometimes a question of timing as well. Can you kind of walk us through the challenges that you faced?
And I'm still facing. I think my decision to do social outreach accreditation program, SOAP as we call it, came from the need to address in some way the glaring inequality, social, economic inequality that exists in our society. Now, the most efficient government, given the best resources at its disposal and corruption removed from the equation, still cannot address that socio-economic inequity that we are finding ourselves at the edge of. And I call it an edge because we're going to fall off that edge very, very soon if we don't address it. Which is why I laud actions like the ones, the Joy of Giving, Daan Utsav, and any kind of activism which comes out of the fourth estate. Because as Sachin just pointed out, sometimes activism of the fourth estate leads to judicial activism, which results in suo motu cognizance being taken of an offense against society. So the social outreach accreditation program was designed. It's in beta. We're still struggling, but we hope to see the light of critical mass in time to come. The idea was to build a culture of social responsibility, of which giving is a huge part. So when I say social responsibility, it doesn't necessarily mean having to part with money, because sometimes you have a lot more to give than actual hard cash. It could be your time, it could be your talent, it could be something that you can do which is valuable to a stakeholder such as an NGO. So the idea behind SOAP was to bring together three stakeholders: NGOs such as CRY, corporates such as any other, and people who wanted to do something for society, contribute to society, but didn't have the right platform. For example, there are lots of NGOs doing great work, but they demand a lot of time from volunteers. For example, Pratham. They would love to have people come and join them, and they're doing some fabulous work, but the minimum duration that you can join them for is starting at 3 months. Now, I'm assuming anybody who's gainfully employed can't take off those 3 months. Again, Teach for India is a great initiative, but the fellowship involves 1 year, or is it 2 years? 2 years to take out of your life and give it. And extreme admiration for those who can do that. But there are a lot of us professionals, people like us sitting in this room, who want to be able to contribute in addition to what they do on the day-to-day basis. So the idea was to take out time, whether you can take out 5 hours a week, 3 hours a week, 2 hours a week, on a Sunday, on a Saturday evening, and do something, and try and imbibe that culture of part-time volunteering within NGOs, and have that volunteering, which comes across as help for the NGOs, be incentivized by corporates. Now, when I say incentivize, I don't mean, anything beyond weightage being given to people who have social service backgrounds. In the West, and an example Mr. Pirimal also gave, we tend to, all the big schools, all the big Ivy schools insist on up to 200 hours of community service. before you can apply. So you can have a great SAT or a GRE score to get into an Ivy League school, but you are going to need social service and community service to actually make the cut. We don't have a system like that. So I spoke with ISB. They were very keen to incorporate it. So the idea was that when somebody walks in for a job interview to a corporate, that corporate, all things being equal, will give greater weightage to somebody who has had, apart from an IIT, IIM on their resume, also some social service. So the idea was to be a platform that incentivizes volunteering, either at a high school level or in college or along your work, and of course, have that incentivized outlook to be rewarded by corporates in terms of weightage. That really was the idea. But, I'd like to again reiterate the point that Mr. Pirimal made before me, that I think the more our friends in the media write about the need for things to be done, the more we are going to see people coming forward and doing it, because I don't think charity is about having to spend a lot of money, which is what somehow it's mistakenly construed to be. I think it's about being able to give whatever you can at that given point of time and try and bridge the gap. There was this policy document that was released by Oxfam last year, which chronicled the degrees of inequality that exist in India. So, for instance, income inequality is something that exists in every society, every democratic society. However, inequality in terms of access to healthcare, education, and sanitation in India is disproportionately more than our inequality of income and wealth. So this is a parameter which Oxfam has used to do a policy document which was released last year, but that's what's glaring. So it's not like there's no gap between the rich and the poor in the West. That exists, but that gap is to some extent reduced because the access to quality education and quality healthcare and sanitation to some extent is bridged through various stakeholders. Now, I think this is the gap that we need to bridge in India if we are to prevent ourselves from falling off the edge.
Thank you so much, because I think this session is also meant to raise our level of consciousness in terms of what's possible. There are many of our readers and who are part of our audience as media who want to give back, and they obviously can't make the kind of commitments that you were talking about, 2 years of your life. And volunteerism, as I've realized it myself through Daan Utsav, is a great way to kind of give back. It also gives you... Sorry.
Just want to add one thing. The biggest hurdle in SOAP is and continues to be the fact that NGOs aren't geared up to this business of weekend volunteering. So you speak to an NGO, and Venkat and I have had this conversation several times over the last 2-3 years. The first question an NGO wants is to, but what am I going to do with somebody who only comes Sunday? So we need to be able to sensitize NGOs to create projects, to be able to utilize somebody who has 2 hours a month, 2 weeks in a year, 2 hours a week. I mean, that's something that the NGOs need to adapt to, because currently most NGOs are looking at people who come to them for a longish period of time and therefore are able to give in a certain job allocation. Sorry, I didn't complete that.
I think it's a very well made point. I know Venkat has kind of raised this several times in terms of NGOs being not geared to kind of handle volunteers, but I'll just kind of move on to Rahil. And we've all watched the growth of social media in the last 5 years, especially probably have the maximum impact on the way that we, kind of look at media newsrooms. I don't want to get into some of the recent happenings in terms of the kind of media policies, social media policies that one kind of has been hearing. But I wanted to kind of focus it on the whole idea that social media sometimes, all the good that it's done in terms of building awareness of causes and all of that, it does tend to, in some cases, make a whole generation of users rather passive. So you almost start believing that because you've kind of put a like there or retweeted or shared something, that you've done your bit. Now, is that a danger there? Do you see that kind of phenomena really kind of inhibiting the growth of real philanthropy and real action, which is what we're debating today?
I think that's a very narrow way of looking at the impact that social has on the culture of information sharing as well as the culture of giving. So within Bombay itself, if you look at a range of examples, people basically, like on Twitter, I see almost on a daily basis now there are dedicated accounts to sourcing blood for victims of trauma accidents. What would be a nightmare of a task just 5 years ago is literally now just people tweet, they direct their tweet to particular accounts in particular cities. Suddenly those accounts retweet those tweets, and you have a pool of donors too. And this is blood. This is, people's lives are saved. Having worked in technology for the last 3 years now, 3.5, 4 years, and in media in the last 6 to 7, I feel that it is for the first time that we have a pool of people who are sort of able to have public conversations at a scale that's been made possible by technology. And a large part of that conversation is also giving. As you pointed out very correctly earlier, that a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but there are conversations, ongoing conversations. This friend of mine who runs a school in the mountains of Kashmir sources a lot of her material of social networks. So she basically puts out a call to, I remember 2 years ago in 2012, I was traveling to Bombay, and I just randomly asked her, hey, I'm going to Bombay, do you need anything picked up for the school? She said, oh, some person has promised me a laptop. Can you go and pick it up? I said, sure. And it was the bizarrest thing ever. And this is a person who I hadn't met her then. We just interacted on Twitter. And she put me in touch with someone in Bandra whose house I went to, who I don't know from Adam, picked up a laptop for kids who I didn't interact with till last year. So that technology has made, if you want to give, if you want to contribute, if you have issues with respect to time, technology has made it possible for you to find ways of doing this. So mentorship programs, or even an RT for someone who's looking for blood at that point in time could be a very, very critical sort of act of giving. Whether we are desensitized by this constant sort of apurdish, exposure to, I mean, that's up for debate. I don't think we have a data set large enough to compare what we're doing with the internet now to what it was previously. Would I say that, say 10 years ago when technology didn't exist, people were more open to giving or contributing? I'd say possibly no, because now you at least have your own networks where you're exposed to these conversations a lot more to then being in closed networks, which is what you were in earlier. And the ability that the technology has given you is your free access to information, your free access to resource. It is, I think, just a matter of finding the right connections.
Well, what's your experience been? You're saying that do matters of philanthropy and even social justice in that sense resonate with social media audiences, because there's a fear that some of those voices get drowned in that whole cacophony that social media is really about, chaos.
No, I think that's true for all sorts of media. In terms of just sort of stories, what stories get highlighted, what stories get picked up. 2 years ago, a year ago actually, when I was still at Change, we started this campaign about this boy with the Hunter syndrome, the Save Aryan campaign. And as the campaign grew, one realized that a lot of organizations became part of that campaign to get this boy access to free medicine, which was otherwise prohibitively expensive. We spoke about it, then Edelman came on board, CNN-IBN came on board. On Twitter, a range of celebrities sort of like helped, to the point that just a few weeks ago, the health minister pledged free medicine, and the company that makes that medicine also pledged that free medicine. So does social media then drown, or mainstream media drown a lot of these voices? I think storytelling is where a lot of these stories sort of keep cropping up, because they are able to exploit the weaknesses of the medium better, or they're able to exploit the ins and outs of the medium better. And some stories get drowned out because they don't have a starting point to the story that they want to tell. So tied into getting people to contribute is the quintessential idea of getting people to tell their story very effectively within the constraints of the medium that they're using to tell their story, to get people to give or get people to contribute.
we'll come back to that a little later in the conversation around new forms of storytelling. Ingrid, sorry, you wanted to add something? Yeah, sure.
I think the difference that social media is making to philanthropy and to social justice, social change, is enormous. I mean, in a situation where mainstream media is increasingly controlled by private interests, social media for many of us is the only way you can get your story out. One. Two, I find, for example, being on Twitter, that journalists now reach out to me rather than me having to pursue them with a story, which is a welcome change. The whole area of policy and politics, I mean, whether it was ARP and the fundraising campaign they did, a lot of that was driven online and could not have been possible. For example, you could not have had a new party reach the scale that it did without social media. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mayday USA campaign, where they raised, I think, $5 million in a week or something like that, for a purpose as esoteric as reforming electoral politics in the US. So, it's not, social media is not limited to, oh, here's this story of pathos and da-da-da, and, please respond. I think you can do interesting things. It's, you still have to be engaging.
Sure.
There's no excuse for being boring in any medium.
Absolutely. In fact, that brings me to another issue that tends to sometimes crop up, the whole role of celebrities. Gul, in the West, we've seen celebrities play a fairly pivotal role in engaging very deeply with the causes that they support, whether it's Helen Hunt or Oprah. Their voice does kind of ring true. They lead with their actions. Are we likely to see that change in India sooner than later?
Well, there could be two aspects to it. One aspect is that there are people who are doing things in secret, and one can't doubt them for that. As Mr. Pirimal himself pointed out, that not everybody is comfortable speaking about what they do. Having said that, if people did more visibly, and considering what huge icons Bollywood people are, I mean, in a country starved of icons, where icons are really limited to cricket stars, thankfully now badminton and a few other sports, kabaddi, and shooting. And these icons, if they were to go public with their secret charity, or if they were to start charity that they're not doing, I think would have a massive cascading impact on their fans. For example, Salman Khan and his Being Human Foundation, I think it set off a trend, and there are people who are definitely sporting his t-shirts. Some may not understand what the foundation does. Some may not even know it's a foundation, but there is a beginning of a sort of awareness that this is being done for social change. Now, it's lamentable that our industry hasn't seen the likes of social activism that the West has. And again, that probably comes from, and I'm going to sort of really use my words very carefully, it probably comes from the fear of taking a stand. Because the moment you take a stand, someone's going to be against you. Because it's not possible to be popular and take a stand. Because the moment you have an opinion, a corollary of that is that you're going to be controversial. Now, in an ecosystem as fragile as ours, where fortunes are made every Friday, where endorsement deals, where the whole shebang comes out of general acceptability, a lot of very, very committed, very vocal Bollywood stars will stop shy of being so in public. I know a lot of people that I would not rather name who have very strong political and social views, but I'm just shocked that they don't express them in public. And I think a lot of them have the stature where they could say what they want to say and get away with it, and perhaps build a greater following. But till such time, we're just going to have to rely on those who are doing things in secret, and hope that those who are doing things in secret come out and start doing them in open, in the hope that they will galvanize their fan following. And those who are not doing anything should be encouraged through your medium, and those of the members of the press, through the power of your pen, to perhaps take up some form of I don't want to use the word philanthropy. I want to just say social consciousness, social responsibility. I think social service itself has gotten a little marred. I mean, people seem to look at social service with a degree of suspicion now. And I feel social consciousness and social responsibility being talked about by celebrities can go a long way in building a culture of social responsibility and consciousness.
I would agree. Thank you for that. I would move on to the next segment, which is meant to be a fun segment. I'd kind of want each of the panelists to kind of rate how they'd view media and its performance in being able to promote a culture of giving. Sachin, I know you'll struggle on this one, and the others, please don't look at your friends in media down the other side, but be brutal and honest. And on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you, 1 being poor and obviously 10 being brilliant, where would you place the current media performance in being able to promote a culture of giving?
2 or 3, honestly.
2 or 3, and why?
Because there's so much more they could be doing. I mean, as a country...
We'll come to that. We'll come to that in the next session. Let's just hear what... Sachin?
The fun part is always the scary part. The media has been... I don't think it is consciously...
No, you're not answering the question.
Maybe 3 or 4, not more than that. The reason is that if the media has never consciously promoted a culture of giving in the sense that they've never used the word "let's give" or the phrase "let's give" or we are giving or we will give. But it's also fair to say that they've taken up causes.
But 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are causes that
I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
I think I'd rate it exactly there. I think around 3 or 4 because of this lack of an active conversation around giving. It's one thing to take up a cause wherein you associate, and the causes that have been taken up are causes that have a very strong echoing in the criminal justice system. Mostly the last 10 years, that the 6 of which I have worked in the media. I don't think there's a focus or an active focus on stories.
I'll come back to Rahil on that. Yeah. There's a reason why I'm interrupting, sorry. So you two will stick to 3 and 4. Gul?
I'm going to be a bit more charitable, and I'm going to say 5, because a lot of social thought is being put out there, even if it's in the garb of marketing and advertising campaigns. So there are business houses, there are media houses that are doing initiatives, even though they're blatantly from their marketing budget. But yes, I think I'm going to take it up to 5 because of that. At least there is conversation on those subjects. Otherwise, that conversation wouldn't have happened.
Right. There's a certain reason why we did that quiz. I'll just make that clear. We're hoping to change the narrative here. So at least we know where we stand. I think the average would be, Gul's been very generous, but it's been 3 or 4. Clearly, if we were to go to 7 or 8, what are the things that we'd have to do differently, right? So that's the thing, and I was hoping that we could do a bit of role-playing. So I'd suggest if Ingrid and Gul, kind of wear the editor's hat. Let's say if you were the editor of a channel or heading a newspaper or a magazine, what are the stories, what are the themes that you would drive that you think current media organizations are missing entirely? What are the 3 or 4 big things, or maybe one big thing that you believe would be really energizing, interesting, engaging, that media just simply doesn't do enough of?
It's hard to pick causes. I mean, there's certainly the one thing we don't lack in India is causes.
Not cause so much. What are the themes in this giving space? It could be like Rahil mentioned, the role of technology, which has changed.
I think what I would look at is picking a theme. So I think when a publication, a channel says, okay, we're going to do the environment,
so what would it be?
And we're going to. I think climate change is a big problem.
Okay.
Is a very underserved issue.
How would you play it?
I think simply making it, if I was a TV channel, for example, simply making it part of my daily programming. It would mean...
But how would you make it engaging?
Strategically saying, how do I embed it into every single program I put out there? Whether it's news or entertainment or gossip or, fashion or whatever. How do I pick environment and then I say, how do I own this cause? In the way that a brand does. I mean, in the way, a brand says, let's take HIV/AIDS as my cause, and then they embed it into every aspect of their marketing. So I would just advocate picking a cause, and I think particularly given that it's the media, I'm appalled at the situation we have in terms of simply media freedom, in terms of surveillance, privacy. These are the freedom of expression, freedom of association. These are causes that should be dear to the media, but apparently the media is going to go with the flow and go to the dark side on these ones rather than... the issue of... every problem, if you will, in our country or anywhere in the world comes from being able to reduce somebody else to the other. I can not be concerned about your fate if you are somehow different from me. I can attack you, murder you, rape you, kill you if I can somehow reduce you to the other. This notion of simply building bridges, compassion, familiarity across the many divides that divide us, and to me that's really where Daan Utsav in some senses transcends everything. This is philanthropy in its purest form. Sure. It's philanthropy, love of humans.
Sure.
Yeah, and it says it doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter on what scale. Simply reach out and do random acts of kindness.
So
I would love to see
like you.
I would love to see a media house just own random acts of kindness.
Sure, there are. This year, particularly, I think a lot of media organizations are stepping forward. I mean, Sachin's been, kind of agreed to host some of these young kids. We're in conversation with the NIE, which is the student edition of the Times of India. They're kind of spreading that message to their whole network of schools. Radio Mirchi is doing some fabulous stuff. They've got a radiothon planned on October 2nd, the entire day on Daan Utsav. So we've got traction, I think. Gul, if you were the editor, what would you do differently?
I would make exposure to good work being done by two categories of people a daily part of my newspaper or news channel. When I say good work, I mean to say they are people who are immensely gifted financially in whatever way, and then there are people who are doing something without being financially gifted. So I would like to do a story every day in the newspaper where I would like to juxtapose an Ajay Perumal and maybe a roadside tea vendor who gives tea, free tea to, let's say, 5 people every day. I'd like to do that every single day for 365 days a year to point out that philanthropy and charity is not a function of your pocket, B, it's not a function of ability, and C, it's really a function of will. Now, the causes can be 365, but every day I'd like to see this juxtaposition of somebody with the means doing something in their sphere for social responsibility and somebody without the means doing jugaad, improvising and still being able to contribute to society in whatever way that is. It could be as small as feeding stray dogs. It could be as great as feeding 5 hungry children. It could be paying the fees of kids that study in the nearby school. And then I would really like to see a different cause being taken up throughout the year. And it's very, very simple because our newspapers, with all due respect to Sachin, are actually becoming really morbid pieces of newsprint. I've made it a policy. I don't read the paper first thing in the morning anymore. And this is something my friend Sanjay Suri told me. He said, if I read the paper in the morning, my whole day goes for a sort of a downward, into a downward spiral. So what I do actually is I get my agenda for the day. I finish my work in office, whatever it is I'm doing. And then when my day can't get any worse. I mean, probably I reach there at about 4 o'clock when I'm fighting yawns, and my to-do list on my table is just expanding. And that's when I say, okay, how much worse can it get? So that's when I open the newspaper. So no offense meant to my friends in the media. You are doing your job. These are things that are happening, unfortunate things. And in fact, it's because you're reporting them now that we know they exist. So I think there needs to be a ray of light every day, a prominent story in every newspaper. It doesn't have to be, big. It just needs to be that juxtaposition of a man and a woman with means juxtaposed with somebody without the means and still doing something. So all of us will fit somewhere between those two extremes. And I think that's a very achievable, very easily doable thing, and that would be my input.
Fantastic. Ingrid, I think
I have one more suggestion for media owners and editors. I think I'd have a cash bonus for the journalist that does the best compassion/giving story every week.
Okay, Sachin, you want to think about that? Okay.
we will be in line for the cash bonus because, when we relaunched our paper in February, redesigned, relaunched, we introduced a daily sunshine page where we have a daily story of at least 3 or 4 stories of compassion, stories of positivity, stories that reach out to the goodness of human beings rather than the badness of human beings that Gul spoke about. One interesting fact: the most viral story that Midday ever put out in its entire history since Midday.com came into being 14-15 years ago was a story about the daughter of an auto rickshaw driver who topped the chartered accountancy exams in the country. It was on the front page of the newspaper. And that story was followed up by almost every single news channel in the country. She became a superstar overnight. And that story alone gave us about 68% of the monthly page views that we get online. There was a huge jump. And that shows the kind of viral nature of positivity.
Yeah, there's the new India rising, clearly. Yeah. I mean, the last story that I remember was the one on St. Stephen's.
Yeah. So the St. Stephen's story is now becoming viral. It's actually because we're surrounded by bad.
That's right.
That good sounds extremely energizing.
Fantastic.
So if you put me that question about if I were an NGO, what would I do?
No, yeah. So I wanted to come to that. Both of you need to wear the NGO hat because there are many folks here who kind of represent many NGOs. And it'll be useful to understand what your advice to them would be, because we would want more of these stories to make it to the newspaper and hopefully change the narrative. But if both of you, Rahil and Sachin, if you could, kind of focus on what your 2 or 3 points of suggestion would be.
The person I worked under for the first time in my life is Ayaz Memon. He's here. He's a managing committee member of the Press Club. I remember one of the first things he told us when we were trainees was, at that time the population of Mumbai was only 14 million. So he said, there are 14 million people in Mumbai. There must be 14 million stories out there. So if you are coming in the evening and telling me that you don't have a story, then you're not a journalist. So that thing has stayed in my mind for a long time. I mean, for 20 years now. So the first thing I would, if I were an NGO, would put out stories of human beings, human success, personal stories of commitment, of compassion that makes people feel good. The reason I'm saying this is that all the NGO stories that we end up reading or watching on television is about the finances that they earn, the amount of money that is going into research. So one of the stories that came out of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge was, why is only 7% of money going in research for the ALS Foundation? And that became the central point of debate rather than the awareness part, right? So there are these multiple angles that you take all the time, and media tends to take the sexy angle. The sexy angle is always either celebrity or money. That's the sad fact of life, right? But if, like the auto rickshaw driver's daughter, or like the St. Stephen's gardener's son, if there are human success stories, personal stories that can be told in the most interesting fashion, and like Ayaz used to tell us, if there are, now the population of Mumbai is 20 million, surely there are 20 million stories out there. So every day there has to be, and this is a brief that we give to our reporters too, that every day there must be at least 2 or 3 nice, positive human interest stories that appeal to the audience at large, and not just, oh, my community person has stood first in class or in a city. That becomes a more divisive agenda for any newspaper or channel, rather than look at the wrong word to use, but a secular story in that sense, which is equal to all or distanced from all. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is engaging technology to tell those stories. Now, fortunately, when we started our journalism careers, we did not have the same avenues of technology that the journalism students and journalism professionals of today have. So we have social media, yes, we have video, we have audio, we have webcasts. This is going on Google Hangout right now, which was unimaginable 10 years ago. So why can't we use the same technologies to reach out to more and more people and more stories?
Rahil, your thoughts?
No, absolutely. Taking off from where Sachin has left it, with the avenues of technology being so commonly available to everyone now, what's important to note for people who are using these avenues, and as Enkel pointed out earlier, that the paradigm it's changed a little bit in this, that she's being approached for stories now, as opposed to her having to go to people for commissioning stories or doing stories. Social media gives everyone an equal opportunity of telling their own story. Now, how well you tell the story and what the skills are, that's really where the rubber, so to speak, meets the road. Having spent, as I said, 2 years working at Change.org, trying to figure out almost on a daily basis what petitions to send to the press and what petitions to send to the email list and so on and so forth, our emphasis would always be on how can we tell the story better. If I find this email in my inbox, what subject line could I possibly use that will get the other person to open it? So thinking of resources that most NGOs or organizations have, thinking of the content that they have and using that content, repurposing that content to tell their story very, very powerfully. I've seen Cry do that like all the time, and that's why the brand is so strong and it's so consistent. If other people also sort of put a certain amount of thought into the kind of story that they want to tell, as very strong, what we call the call to action, like telling people immediately within the first 5 seconds in an attention-starved economy what they need to do. That's why I say you see the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge taking off. It's a very, very simple thing to do. You just have to dunk yourself with a bucket of ice. And things like these tend to go viral. They tend to go viral globally because they are uncomplicated. The call to ask is simple. And they play out at several levels of nuance. So you can basically do something, and I don't say that you can do something gimmicky at one level that gets a lot of conversation going, and then as Sachin pointed out, you can do a stronger piece or bigger piece, and there will be demand on the funding into ALS research. So certainly the space for that conversation opens up in mainstream media where basically you want to send this across. A lot of times we've noticed that a lot of these issues get exposure and resolution on social media itself without the mainstream media ever coming into play. So figuring out that solution of finding a good story, finding the right influencers to send that story to, and finding the right audience for that story is a great skill to invest in. And there are hundreds and hundreds of resources online. There are platforms like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, which make it possible for everyone with a smartphone now to just click a photo, click a wine, send it across, get traction. Just focusing on hard skills of telling powerful, strong stories.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll now kind of open it up for audience Q&A. Because I think we've got a wonderful audience, and I'm sure there are people who'd like to kind of raise a couple of issues that we may have missed. I'd request you, there are 2 mics with the 2 lovely ladies. They're volunteering from Sophia. Let me introduce them, Saloni and Dipshita. And please introduce yourself and what you do. Keep your question short and, direct.
I'm Nandikishore Bharti of Navbharat Times. Last year when this Bill Gates was here and he exhorted the corporate sector of India for donation, I was laughed on him. Why? Because it is a very ancient for India. You see this bits of planning, birlas, they are 800 crore rupees every month, every year they spend on the CSR activities. So it is not a very new concept for India. It is very ancient. And not for even corporate sector, even common men. If you go to Andheri and Goregaon, you see in the mornings, on footpath, there is hundreds of street children. Students are enjoying the benefits of this CSR activities. Khichdi hai, school ka pura muft matlab bag hai, uniforms. They are getting each and everything.
So your point is,
my point is that it is not a new concept. But only problem is that now there is a media has no enjoy in this area because they thinks about the other sectors which is more readable. So but now as आप सब लोगों ने कहा कि जो नया मीडिया जो आ रहा है, सोशल मीडिया जो आ रहा है, उसके साथ में इनकी कोई हमको टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया और मिड डे की कोई जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, बिकॉज वो सब आप जब अपना बस मोबाइल करिए और सारी आपकी जो गतिविधियां सबको पूरे वर्ल्ड में पहुंच जाएगी. सो आई एम थैंकफुल फॉर दिस न्यू मीडिया. थैंक यू.
So I don't know whether anyone has any specific comment to make on this. Otherwise, we'll move on to. Thank you for your feedback. Anyone else? Charles? Can you introduce yourself for the... You haven't paid your dues. You haven't paid your dues. Huh?
Am I audible now? Okay. So, Sachin, a question for you. You know the point you made about positive stories, quote unquote positive stories. Now, this is something which we've heard about, and I can be blunt about it. I mean, there's this, this thing which we've heard. Samir Jain, for instance, he said he's spoken about this in the past, and it is taken with a certain amount of, with a certain amount of, it's not articulated loudly in the newsroom, but it is taken with a certain amount of flooziness, so to speak. Oh, these are floozy stories that ought to be done, kind of a thing. We're doing it because we have to do it, and because the story has to be, because the paper has to look happy and positive. Now, what has it taken for you to change the mindset in the newsroom? Has it been an uphill task? Were there any roadblocks that you faced?
Not really. I mean, there were no roadblocks as such because, like I mentioned in the answer to IG, we were looking at human stories of success. You know, the front page is always about scams or murder or killing or rape or some kind of financial fraud that has kept thousands under poverty and whatnot. Of course, there's a sad part of the society or the dark side of society, as Ingrid put it. We have to highlight that. That's the responsibility of the media to highlight all the misgovernance that is happening in the country and whatnot. But at the same time, Mumbai, I mean specifically for our paper, the paper that I work for, Mumbai is not just about potholes. It's not just about broken bridges. It's not just about trains not coming on time. It's not just about people getting robbed of 20 lakh of the money, etc. It's also about those millions of people out there who are doing a great job. One of the stories that never gets talked about, we always write about how BMC is corrupt, how BMC is the most it's the richest municipal organization in the country. Its budget is bigger than most state budgets, but it's corrupt, it's this, it's that, it cannot keep up with the times, etc. Yet there are these group of people who are under the radar across the country, across the city, who are financed by the BMC, which are in Marathi they're called Bachat Guts, and they're all run by underprivileged women who have alcoholic husbands, whose husbands don't work, whose sons don't work, whose spouses are drug addicts, and they've lost all the money, and they're brought into the mainstream, what the BMC does is give them a seed funding of 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees into the bank account, and then they create little things like trinkets, little things like papads, etc., and they're sold all across the city. Now, the happy story that happened 2 weeks ago was that someone in France, just outside Paris, saw this program out of pure chance on Doordarshan about this lady who is leading this entire project. She lives in Ghatkopar. And he saw it on Doordarshan, and he flew down from Paris to Mumbai, and he bought trinkets and jute bags and other things, other things which are made of recycled paper, worth 80,000 rupees, and went back and sold them in Paris. Now, isn't that a great story to communicate to our readers? Now, these are the kind of stories which you will never see in primetime debates or through the day in television channels or in newspapers or magazines, because, like I said, we are all focused on the sexy part of news, which is money or celebrity or potholes or whatnot. So it's the negativity that excites us. But in the true sense, it is the positivity that gives us hope. So positivity need not necessarily mean that I get opposition from the management or opposition from the readers. So why would a positive story come on the front page of the newspaper that I work for? There is no particular reason when 7 other newspapers are showing that there's a coal scam happening in the country. But the moment you put that out, you realize that there is a need, and more than that, a demand for these kind of stories. And if I can get Gulpanag to wake up in the morning and read a newspaper with that positive story, and rather than at 4 o'clock, I think that will be a victory for the newspaper industry. And it's Gulpanag, I can tell you, is not the only one. The first thing I do when I wake up at 6 o'clock is read Twitter.
Hide the paper.
Yeah. So the other reason is that my newspaper vendor is lazy; he doesn't come before 7:30. But that's the thing. Between 6 and 7:30, that's all I do. I mean, read updates on Twitter, go to online newspapers, and read everything. So the paradigm of all that news being consumed is changing. So it need not necessarily be the sad news that is on the front page.
The 2 points I think that you're making. One is that it's not as if these stories are not subjected to rigor. I mean,
absolutely.
It's not as if they pass through because it's a happy story.
No, not at all. No.
The other thing is that you're talking about being skeptical as journalists, not cynical. I think what we've become is, to some extent, bordering on cynicism.
Yeah. We tend to dispute every story that comes to us. But the truth is that, one of the things that Ingrid spoke about, when they were experimenting with CRY, one of the things that they did was hold a CRY corporate quiz, if you remember, which was hosted by Derek O'Brien. Now, I have fond memories of that because I won that quiz. But but the fact is that it ran for about 3 to 4 years, and then it just stopped. And then, of course, the brand equity quiz took note, took prominence, and BBC Mastermind came. So those big brands, got covered in the media more rather than the CRY corporate quiz. So there are these various things that can be spoken about and can be done from the NGO sector, from people, from the media, which need not necessarily be floozy in that sense. I mean, they're not floozy stories. They're subjected to extreme rigor. We do a lot of fact-checking. We spend, like I said in the beginning, offline, we spend a lot of money just doing fact-checking. Sometimes it takes us 3 days to corroborate a story. Which is why many of the stories we miss out on, because we are still doing the fact-checking. So, of course, we go wrong at times. It's not that we are a perfect newspaper. Every newspaper has its...
It's also about setting your newsroom priorities. Today, you'd find, I think, the biggest newsroom resources are devoted to crime. So, therefore, the page 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 are full of largely crime-related stories. So, sure.
I have another question which actually takes forward what he's saying here, which is that I would think that maybe with the advent of your online papers, you would have greater freedom to do the kind of stuff that you have. I mean, obviously there are commercial constraints in terms of your paper being picked up from the stand, over other papers out there. But wouldn't the fact that papers are today online cut through that chase a bit? I mean, not about verification of the stories, but in terms of the positioning of stories.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of modern day journalism, that you have a plethora of avenues and options to choose from. So even for me, before the newspaper lands up on my door, I know what the front page story of the Times of India is, because I've read the e-paper already. No, not because I have spies inside. Not because I've got spies inside there. But, sorry? But that's the reality that we have to face. So newspapers these days have to increasingly focus on stories that are not carried by the mainstream newspapers or channels the previous night. Sadly, our newspaper agenda is driven by television from the previous night. So that needs to change first of all. So in that change, if we get positivity, why not?
I think one of the things NGOs sometimes don't do enough of is building those relationships. I mean, the intercorporate quiz, there was even an intercorporate cricket tournament that CRI would do in Delhi. And so it was an intercorporate thing, but after the tournament was over, the winning team would play a team of journalists just for fun. And this was just a way to meet journalists on a day when you weren't seeking a story. In Chennai, they would have them over for a Christmas thing, a Christmas do with the kids. Again, no story expectation. It's just, you're going to come and spend some time with our kids. And so that thing of building relationships when you don't need the story, that you can then leverage when you do need the story, is one. The second one is being a credible source. I think if you're, as an NGO, if you're a credible source, and if journalists know that they can call you and get reliable data, depth information, that's a key thing that you can leverage. But I think beyond all that, I mean, if I look at, for example, the New York Times does this at Christmas, New Year. They pick 4 or 5 causes, right, or NGOs. Now, can we take the rigor of journalism and say, I, the publication, have gone out there and vetted 20 different organizations in the city of Bombay, and based on my research and cynicism and all the rest of it, these are the 3 that I really want you to support, and I'm going to be the platform that then encourages the citizens of Bombay to contribute to this thing. That would be a cool thing. That's using your skill set for good, no?
Absolutely. Wonderful ideas. Sorry, Vijay, can we get a mic across? Vijay, if you could just tell people who you are and what you do, and then we can... Sorry. Oh, Sachin. Okay. Go ahead.
You want me to take the question, or Vijay?
Why don't you go ahead and then...
Okay, I'm Sachin. I'm a financial services professional. Just wanted to focus on one question. It says role of the media in the culture. Now, nobody is talking about one thing, which is that we need somebody like Jack Welch and Six Sigma to tell us how good our Dabbawala system is, right? Similarly, we had a early question, or actually a comment, about traditional giving, and why we are okay, there's nothing wrong with us. No. I can find 10 things wrong with that type of giving, but I can find 10 things which are right. Similarly, I can find 10 ways in which an NGO story is told in the English media, because that's my media, I read English, and I can find 10 things which are wrong with that, and 10 things which are right. Now, if you're going to make this mainstream, almost by definition, we have to get out of those shibboleths. So if you want to change culture, role of the media in changing a culture, nobody's talking about that. There's a way in which these stories are reported. Bechare ko de do. Right? In Indian giving is more often than not this way, downwards. Supplicant, give it, bechare ko, give the poor, and get your conscience clear. Very often in the more progressive cultures, giving is about giving you a leg up to come and sit next to me. Indian giving is never about that. It's about keeping you where you are, but because I have more, I'll give it to you. So what is the role of the media in changing that culture around that same act? And how does that go forward?
I'm sure they'd have answers to that, but I thought we were talking about changing that narrative and a very different form of giving rather than the kind of giving that you're talking about, which is more traditional. But happy to have anyone who wants to respond.
Well, I think that's a very, very valid point. It's got to do with exactly the difference between inclusive growth and equal opportunity. Inclusive growth means I made lots of money and somebody who works for me made also some money. Not the same amount. Obviously, that can never happen in most market-driven societies. I'm not a communist, just clarifying. Similarly, but I was once at 18. But equal opportunity is about giving that leg up to somebody so that they can be the full potential that they have within them and be the person that they ought to have been. I think that is the bigger role that the media needs to play in behavior modification and changing those perceptions. Now, that is a challenge for people like Sachin to be able to overcome, because I think that's precisely what we need to first be a more equal society in our heads. And of course, we have biggest impediments in the form of things like the caste system and religious divides, which are being further thrust into our mainstream discourse. Things like religion and caste are things that shouldn't be discussed in newspapers, and yet, unfortunately, they make their presence felt every single day on every single page of every single newspaper. So I think the starting point of that, sir, would be to remove the lines that define us and that create hierarchies from reporting, to be able to make it more egalitarian in a small sense. Sachin, take that forward.
One small problem here, this whole business of not covering something. Don't cover caste, don't cover this. You know what? The conversation today is more real in the immediately post-independence, and for almost 30 years, we had a bunch of elites who talked one language, while everybody else talked the other language, and we close our eyes and said, we don't see it. It's not true. Just because we didn't cover it. At least now it's in the open. And therefore, it is being pushed to one extreme, and the reaction of the mass is to say, no, that's not good enough. Let's come back somewhere to the middle. So it's at least honest. Dishonesty is going out of the system, that's great. But the question is that when we use dishonesty to hide ourselves, for example, I have given my charity. Excuse me, that's not what we're talking about. That's not the correct form of charity. Or I've given it to my school, my child's school, or the neighbor's school. So how do you change that? How do you change the way of the conversation? Media creates conversations in society. It can't talk about something which society does not want to talk about, right? It can lead sometimes, but it moves a conversation forward. It does not make a conversation happen.
I disagree with that. I think the very initiation of a thought, because the precursor to any change in society, and this has been historically and politically documented, is discussion, debate, dialogue, and discourse. So even if the idea doesn't exist, you introduce that in conversation. So you introduce an idea which doesn't exist. Let me give you an example, since I'm a political science student, having done my master's in the subject. Do you know that sati, we all knew how bad sati was, but it took legislative intervention of a foreign power to stop it. We were defending it in our public discourse. So there's behavior modification is what we're all talking about. So I disagree when you say new ideas cannot be introduced. I think fundamentally in the way we conduct our social business, when I say business, of course, I don't mean business per se, but I mean our conversations, new ideas can be put in the newspaper, which further generate debate, discussion, and discourse, and changes that behavior which is sort of an autopilot in a particular way. So I definitely think new ideas can be introduced, but having said that, any change in society anthropologically needs 3 generations, that's 45 years. So from the first day that an idea is introduced, it needs 45 years on an average to see results, because one generation will grow up hearing about it, the second generation will actually grow up imbibing it, and the third generation will have it as a part of life. And that's when change in society happens. The problem in India is we are existing in multitudes of millennia. So it's much harder, but at least those people who consume media, when I say English and vernacular, I think it can a start can be made at that point by starting conversations on issues we don't want to talk about.
Thank you. This is a tough question to handle in a panel discussion, but I'm sure that we can continue that conversation. Anyone? Vijay?
Hi, my name is Vijay. Actually, I've just been just would like to add to something that you said and something that Gul you said as well, which is that we've been talking about the behavior of giving, whereas actually we are talking about a certain kind of a consciousness that drives a culture, right? And the two are very different. And the way I read articles, and if I look at the role of media and philanthropy and awards and this and that and the other, it seems to me as if there is a whole lot of emphasis given to the behavior and the act of giving, whether it's a tea vendor giving tea or whether it's a large corporate donating a lot of money, but not enough emphasis given to the motivation that underlies that, or indeed the kind of consciousness that is there, the consciousness of inclusion, the consciousness of goodwill, the consciousness that we are all one people, etc., etc., etc. So my request to the media, if you like, is to report at a deeper level than just reporting the act of giving. I think the act of giving actually is a red herring in. It's only the outcome of the kind of consciousness we have as individuals and as a society. And if truly the media has to promote a culture of giving, not just more giving, then I suspect that the stories have to be not so much about what somebody did, but why they did it and what was their internal state that led them to do something like that. And I just don't see enough stories in any media, print, online, and social. And perhaps there is a challenge of 140 characters. Perhaps there are many challenges. But unless we are able to go deeper than the behavior, there will never be a change in the culture. There might be emulation of behavior. So-and-so gave, so I would like to give. But actually that's not going to last because my motivation hasn't changed. And really, if the media has to play a role, then the reporting needs to be at a far deeper level than it currently is my suggestion.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, there are no two ways about that.
In fact, I think the reason why you're witnessing the kind of coverage that you talked about is, I think, the difference between an event and a phenomena. Media, we tend to be obsessed about the event and forget the bigger picture phenomena view, which allows you to kind of go deeper and kind of sink your teeth into understanding the underpinnings, as it were. And that's, again, a function of newsroom culture, newsroom priorities, speed of response, if you like. But it's something that will be, to my mind, a slow burn. But it's something that's still, to my mind, work in progress. But is there any... I think we're kind of running out of time. Would it be possible if we can continue the conversation after the panel? Or do you have a quick question?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Arpita Mittal. We offer speech and drama program for children. India is a very young country, and I was just wondering whether what can be done, because I would like to share my experience of last year. Children, we are present in 40 cities, and there are 30,000 children enrolled with us. And last year, when Mr. Usher and Mr. Amit Shah and everybody came to us to mobilize support, the response was immense. Almost every city, every school, every kid wanted to take part in Daan Utsav. I think if that initiative, this positivity we have been talking about, there is no cynicism in this segment. If we can give a fillip to their enthusiasm by reporting on the acts and the willingness of the youngsters. Saloni, Ipshita, they are the pillars of the future India. And if they are here volunteering, that is a very important and major part which has to be reported. And I think media can play a very important role in that. Thank you. Thank you for giving me time.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Sure.
I want to go back to where Sachin started on this. I think let's not lose. I really need, as a citizen of this country, I really need media to first of all deliver on their core function. To be a free, unbiased watchdog of the other institutions of society. One. Two, I really would like to just see compliance on a set of things. I would like to see media not name rape victims. I would like to see the media, follow codes of conduct. Just obey the law would be a good second level of media responsibility. And then if they still have the capacity really, then I'd like to see them go into some sort of codified, if we can, media social responsibility. I mean, there are strategic ways to do this. It shouldn't depend on the whim or the goodwill of this owner or that editor or this journalist or that relationship. Really something that is built into strategy, that is built into people's performance incentives, that is built in, hardwired into the way they work, would be a good way to, I think, start this thing off.
I in fact meant to ask Sachin about media's kind of CSR agenda as well, which we don't hear much of, but unfortunately, we've completely run out of time. Thank you.
For that, the media has to make money first.
Now we're getting to it. So.
So therefore, what we have to do is Sachin, others, Press Club, have to convince editors that, look, take it as a beat. It's a certain area that has to be looked upon and investigated. And don't wait for celebrities. You see, I mean, as a student in as a postgrad student in 84, when houses were being demolished in Cuff Parade, we had to drag Shabana out, make a part of Nivara Haq, and then the government negotiated. She sat on hunger strike for 10 days. After that, they negotiated. If the celebrity wasn't there, those guys would have been kicked into the sea. And today, those 350 families have all got homes in Goregaon. So that was a victory, but we needed celebrities. And you need more celebrities to come in. I think there are very, very few. If that had come in, so it's both cutting edge. It's both sides of the coin. So you need celebrities to increase this consciousness of giving, of social participation of causes. At the same time, there is no independent investigation of media in that. There's got to be a celebrity somewhere there. Otherwise, nobody's going to come, Unfortunately, here also, despite all you celebrities, we have a very low attendance. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know who we should have got. Maybe we would have got, possibly, maybe. Salman would have been a complete kind of houseful sort of thing. But anyway, that's the problem. So let's create a beat and a space within media. I think that's what maybe we should conclude with.
It will start small. So I think it's a good beginning, I'd say, to change the narrative, as I keep saying. You're not going to get results overnight, given the kind of path that we've walked down. For us to turn back and head towards in a new direction will take some time. But we've got to work at it. So on that note, I'd kind of thank the panel for all the perspective and insights and for being such an attentive audience. I'd kind of request Ayaz to kind of propose a vote of thanks. Yes. You can speak from there.
Okay, I'll speak from here. Just... sorry? Oh, okay. But I can't wind up without a small little yarn about the media. So, Gul, waking up in the mornings and reading sad stories and bad stories is... you could have tried out with the sports pages first, which is what I do. But there also you get bad news, so that's not, good enough.
Bad enough that bad news is blamed on women who accompany them.
Exactly.
That's terrible.
Yeah. But just to, I thought it was a very interesting discussion, some very relevant questions asked, but I just wanted to emphasize that the nature of news and the nature of stories changes. It evolves. It's not static. The Illustrated Weekly of India till about 1978, 79, 80, till the time it folded up, but about 10, 15 years before that, second last and or third last pages, you will have pictures of people who had got married recently and they send their pictures in. And those were published. Today you have page 3. That's the difference. It's evolved to that, people want, ultimately, I think that we can sit here and debate ad infinitum, but unless your readership wants, has evolved to that extent, and you know what your reader wants, it's going to be an imbalance. We can be talking a lot in the air. Ultimately, as in the finance journalism thing, they say bad money drives good money out of circulation. Likewise, bad news drives good news out of circulation. Not because the editors don't want it, but it's because the readers actually crave for bad news. And there is a certain time. I'm telling you, this is what research has shown. Now the good part is that in the wired world, in the world of the internet, in the world of the new media, you can pick and choose. There's a lot of empowerment. It's not as yet happened so much in India because cable penetration is not high or internet penetration is not high, but ultimately a newspaper has got finite space. The web has infinite space. You can put in a lot more. In a newspaper, between the choice between a tea vendor who's giving 5 cups or 10 cups of tea free to a multiple murder that has taken place in your city, ask any news editor what is the choice between that story, it's a no-brainer. Yet, the fact that on social media and on the net, people go and search for sunshine stories tells you that there is a dimension to our own personalities and our need for news and information which is far wider than what a newspaper can offer. So that's the good part. But we'll have to wait and see how that evolves. Anyway, I think we've had a great discussion and anchored superbly as always by Indrajit. So thanks Gul, thanks Rahil, Sachin and Ingrid. And in absentia, Mr. Piramal, who's not there. But before we wind up, I think on behalf of the Press Club and the Managing Committee, I don't remember all the names. Venkat, where's he? He's the mastermind. Press Club believes in walking the, walk the talk. So we are giving away these mementos first up. Yes. Thank you for being a lovely audience. And if there are any questions that you need to ask offline, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer them. Or ask it on Twitter.